I'm estate planning attorney Paul Rabelais, and in this video we're going to talk about when distribution should be made from a trust to a beneficiary. Okay, so here's the background. You can give away money to your heirs voluntarily if you want to during your lifetime, or you can provide that when you pass away, you leave assets or money to your heirs. And essentially there's two ways to either give or leave money or assets to your heirs. The first way you can do it is you give or leave it to them outright. So you pass away, you left $200,000 to your child or to your grandchild, they get a check. That's the outright bequest. They do what they want to with it. You have no say-so as to when they get it or how it could be used. And many people elect to do that, particularly when their heirs are very responsible, very common. The second way you can give or leave assets to your heirs, whether it's children, grandchildren, or other people, is to leave it to them in a trust. And this is not something that's for just the rich folks. I mean, you could be leaving a couple of $100,000 to somebody, and the worst thing you could do is leave it to them outright. Maybe they're on drugs or they have poor spending habits, or for whatever reason, it's just not right for them to get a big check, probably because they're going to waste it. So this is really middle class, middle class on up, a good conversation to have. So in this video, I want to talk about 9 different ways you can provide for distributions from a trust to a beneficiary. All right, number 1 is you leave it to them in a trust and they get it at a certain age. You see this a lot when parents with minor children set up their wills, set up a trust for their children, and the parents usually say something like, if we pass away and we have young children, then when we pass away, our estate will go into a trust for our young children, and they can get their share when they reach the age of 25. Now, if they say that, they'll probably also say something like, in the event before they're 25, if the trustee determines they need assets for their health, education, maintenance, or support, the typical HEMS standard, HEMS, health, education, maintenance, and support, then the trustee has the discretion to make distributions to or for those beneficiaries prior to that termination date at age 25. So that's example number 1. Number 2 is they receive it at a certain date. Maybe parents have 3 children relatively close in age, or maybe grandparents have 5 grandchildren, and the grandparents set up a trust for those grandchildren and say, at a specified date in the future, let's say those grandchildren, where they're anywhere from age 2 to age 7, grandparents say on June 30th of the year 2040, this trust ends and distributions shall be made payable to the beneficiaries, all of the beneficiaries on that date. So that's another option. Option number 3, which is kind of common, particularly for parents leaving things to young people, grandparents leaving things to grandchildren, will say, grandparents will say, I leave $50,000, 5% of my estate, whatever, to my grandchildren and in trust, and they will receive the trust assets. They'll receive it in stages. They'll get 1/3 of the trust assets when they reach the age of 25, 1/2 of what's left when they reach the age of 30, and the remainder at the age of 35. The thought process is, let's give them a distribution at 25, and if they screw it up, at least that's just strike 1. They'll have 2 more opportunities to get it right at age 30 and 35. That's the idea there. Option number 4 on how you provide for distributions to a beneficiary for a trust is, distributions or the trust can terminate upon a certain event. So sometimes you see parents and grandparents saying, I'm leaving assets to a trust for my children or grandchildren, and the trust will terminate and the trustee will turn the assets over to the beneficiary when the beneficiary graduates from college. So that's the idea there is to give that grandchild some incentive to go to college and to graduate. But some beneficiaries never graduate from college. So you need some termination date just in case that event does not occur. So then they wind up doing something like, Yeah, I leave it in trust for my children, grandchildren, and they can have it at the earlier to occur of they graduate from college or age 30. That way, if they don't graduate from college, they get it when they're 30, but if they graduate from college, they get it before them. So that's another option. A fifth option that's really popular is the beneficiaries can receive the trust assets completely at the trustee's discretion. So on the beneficiary side, a grandparent may be saying, I'm going to leave some assets to my grandchildren, but they're 3 years old. I have no idea how they're going to turn out. What if they get to where they're 25 or they're 30 and they're on drugs, or they don't know how to handle money? What if I've said that they get it when they're 25 and they're on drugs at the time? And at the same time, they're saying we have a rock solid trustee who we trust implicitly to do the right thing for those beneficiaries. That's likely when you're going to see a grandparent, for example, set up a trust and provide that the trust shall terminate at the trustee's discretion. So the trust might say, whenever that trustee, I'm leaving X dollars, X percentage of my estate to a trust for my children, for my grandchildren, but I leave it in trust and I name, for my grandchildren, maybe I name one of the children as the trustee. And whenever that trustee determines that the beneficiary is capable of handling the trust assets appropriately, then at the trustee's discretion, the trustee can terminate the trust and turn the assets over to the beneficiary. So again, they can, trustee typically under those circumstances can always make distributions for that HEMS standard, health, education, maintenance, and support. But the problem is, what if the relationship between that trustee and the beneficiary turns sour and that trustee kind of holds those funds hostage and the beneficiary never gets anything? So what you're probably starting to realize is there's no perfect example. You just have to apply these standards to your circumstances and kind of let it ride. Option number 6 for how long a trust lasts or when a beneficiary can receive the trust assets. Option number 6 is the trust lasts for the lifetime of the beneficiary. That may be necessary when it's anticipated that the beneficiary will never be able to handle money. Maybe parents have a child who's 45 years old and, every time he gets a nickel, he spends a quarter. And so the parents feel like, geez, and Pete's, he's 45 years old. He'll never be able to handle money. So the parents decide to leave that child's share in a trust, maybe provide for some distributions, but really the trust never ends and the whole of the trust assets are never really turned over to that beneficiary. You also see that sometimes when parents or grandparents have heirs who have special needs, and those special needs children, for 2 reasons, the trust lasts for the lifetime of that special needs child. Number 1, special needs child may just not be able to handle money. And number 2, the special needs child may be getting certain government benefits, and turning those trust assets over to the special needs child may force that special needs child to lose those government benefits that they're getting. And then another reason you see sometimes parents and grandparents leaving assets to a trust for the lifetime of the beneficiary is maybe those assets need to be protected from the creditors of the beneficiary, because as long as it stays in that trust, the beneficiary's creditors can't take that beneficiary's interest in the trust. So another reason to keep that trust in existence for the lifetime of the beneficiary. Option number 7, kind of a controversial one, is incentive-based trust distributions. So you factor the distributions based on the beneficiary achieving certain conditions. And so now you're really kind of controlling from the grave, and you're controlling the behavior of the beneficiary. So for example, maybe you say, all right, the trust will match the beneficiary's earned income up to a certain amount. Or the trust might say, the trust will provide for a monthly payment to that stay-at-home mom. Trust may provide or deny distributions based on a failed drug test. Maybe provide additional distributions for psychotherapy treatment. Maybe even additional distributions when there's no driving violations. But that incentive-based trust distributions, it forces that beneficiary down a path, and sometimes that beneficiary doesn't want to have to go down that path. For example, let's say a beneficiary has a learning disability and the incentive-based trust is based on graduating from college or maintaining a certain grade point average. So got to be careful about that. Option number 8 is distributions from a trust for a specific purpose. The person who establishes the trust says, well, when the beneficiary is going to buy a house, I authorize a distribution to make the down payment. Or I authorize a distribution if the beneficiary wants to start a business or start a professional practice. Maybe it's to buy a car. Maybe it's to pay insurance expenses. So again, tied for a specific purpose. And then a ninth and final provision is to say, okay, I'm leaving assets to a trust for this beneficiary, and I want this beneficiary to get a set amount per month until the trust runs out. So sometimes people say, I want that beneficiary to get $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $500 a month. And maybe even there's some inflation adjustment language factored into the trust instrument. So if they're getting $2,000 a month one year, the next year maybe they're getting $2,050 based on the appropriate inflation adjustment factor. So maybe the problem there is, let's say somebody's rocking along getting their $2,000 a month, and then there's this pile of $400,000 in the trust, and that beneficiary has a very maybe unique and a need that, that beneficiary really could get a benefit from additional distributions, but the trust instrument just doesn't permit it. So what we've got here is a bunch of options for how you can leave things in a trust for your heirs. A lot of factors go into these decisions, from not only who the beneficiaries are and how old they are and what's their maturity level and what you want them to accomplish with those trust distributions, to who's going to be the trustee, who's going to be the backup trustee, what's the relationship between the trustee and the beneficiary, how certain are you that the trustee is going to honor your wishes with their discretionary authorizations that they have. So all that goes into it. So there's a lot. And again, it's not just for the rich. Giving and leaving assets to another, particularly when they're young or immature, really important. Really got to be really careful. Do it right. Hope this helps. One thing you'll also want to make sure, as I always remind you, smash the like button and punch the subscribe button along with the notification bell so you don't miss anything, and you tell the YouTube algorithms to show Paul's videos to more people. I hope you enjoyed watching this half as much as I enjoyed making it. We will see you next time.